Hello, and thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is another type of kind of black and white on blue matte cardstock type of scene. And this one was a little bit different. I was inspired by this video that I saw. There was a little thumbnail on Pinterest, and I followed the link, and it was this paper cutout scene. Now, this does not look like a flat paper cutout. I ended up kind of taking it in a direction that's a little bit more along the lines of stamping than using kind of shadow cutout types of objects. I'll link to the video that I'm talking about if I can find it again in my description down below this video. Just click on the show more. But this is using just white and black pigment ink. I did use some black dye-based inks on here, but you can get a pretty full range of values by using kind of a minimal range of tones and media in here. I just used it in varying degrees of saturation. So I did a lot of second impressions in this video, stamping something off and going for it again and getting kind of a gray tone instead of a, straight, strong black. Variations of gel pens, ones that were a little bit more translucent and ones that were more opaque, i.e. cheaper and more expensive gel pens. Not expensive, but more expensive than 10-cent ones, but the 10-cent ones have been utilized for the effect that they create in here. So a fun scene, and the difference is in this one right here is I have this kind of center lit area like this, and that's a little bit different for me, stamping out something in both black and white and getting them to merge in kind of a harmonious way was the trick here, and that was done with the use of pigment ink, I think, and the use of texture and things like that. But I don't know, I like the end result here, and I don't know, it was just one kind of big experiment. I had no idea what it would look like in the end result. So anyways, if you want to see this done and the process that it was created with, you can watch the video, and I hope you enjoy it. Alright, let's play around with some pigment ink applications on dark matte cardstock. This one happens to be kind of a navy blue. Well, it's not really navy. I don't know what color. Steel, dark steel blue, maybe. I saw this scene on Pinterest, and it was a link to an animated stop motion. I don't know. It's not really paper folding. It's this paper, like a cut paper diorama using various layers of, I guess, white imagery, and the way they lit this imagery resulted in, I don't know, just various degrees of different values throughout the piece, I guess. It sure looked like when I just looked at a still image of it, it looked like I don't know, it looked like a digital, kind of almost shadow puppet style of imagery, but some of them were white, some of them were gray, and some of them were black. And some of them had gradations, so I don't know if they were lighting this thing with, just little LED lights or something like that. I'll link to it in the description below if I could find it. But it was really interesting, and I wanted to do something in that spirit. Okay, so I'm just stamping this in Versafine black. I could have got a little bit of a stronger black impression there. I need to stand up when doing this. I'm doing this on a folded card, so it's not that even, but I don't know, if some of the image doesn't imprint, that's okay. Okay. Alright, so a couple trees like so. I wish I had some gray pigment ink or something of that sort, but I don't. I don't know how it would look actually. Maybe going with a second impression or something like that after I ink it up would be better. I'm not really sure. It's always kind of hard to tell when doing things like that. All right, now I'm wondering if I should stamp this in there or not. Yeah, okay. It was the way the set was kind of put together. It looked more like a diorama. So I don't know if I'm going to do things in the foreground. Maybe I might. And I'll just have to see how things kind of develop here. But these things right down here, it's really hard to see because it's dark on a very dark paper, but there's different imagery in here, of course, that looks more three-dimensional because of the shading that's going on. But in this piece, it was more like a cutout piece, so I want things kind of in that spirit, so I am going to alter a couple things around. I'm looking for my acrylic block that's kind of more of a rectangle. Thought I was fairly organized on my workstation here. Oh, here it is. It was underneath that my stamps that I just used. All right, this acrylic block with some tack and peel applied to it. Tack and peel, you can see my video on that, or you can just look it up. Sticky surface, tacky surface. For a temporary mounting of your mounted stamps. Okay. Inked up, and I'm going to have these trees kind of growing out of these little islands. Except these aren't supposed to be islands here, they're just going to be little mounds, but it'll give it kind of more of that two-dimensional spirit. Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, I see something like that. Okay. And let's do it again. This doesn't quite fit this, so I'm going to readjust this over here, because I'm going to be using the opposite side. And I'll come in from this side like so. All right, so we have that, and now for the background, it's going to be a little bit trickier. Now I'm just measuring. I'm not going to. These ones aren't going to be in black, but they'll be in white. And that's where the experiment begins, because I have no idea. Maybe I will go for a second impression of this, though, to create kind of a little bit more of a grayscale. I'm not sure, but because Versafine is so dark, it might just stamp out, you know, absolutely black again. Okay. But we'll see how it goes. Alright, so I'll stamp it out one impression over here, and I'll see if I can get another impression. I am gonna, now normally I wouldn't have to mask off these, but this stamps out so much darker and solid than those trees in this instance. If I'm doing it in dye-based inks, I don't need to do this, but in this case, I think I will mask off. It's just a simple ripped paper towel, which is usually the extent of... Oh, that worked perfect. And I know it all along! Not really. Okay, so see, that's kind of a lighter version in the distance right there. Alright, now let's go for this one right here, now letting you know that that works. I'm more familiar with working with dye-based inks, so I know how those ones work in terms of the values from secondary impressions and whatnot. Versafine is such a dark ink, and I don't know, I've had the pads for a long time, but I don't use them too much because oftentimes I'm doing glossy paper techniques. So this is kind of a new experience. Okay, we have something like that going off in the distance. In reality, I'd have a little bit in there. Well, maybe I could mess that off and we'll put a little piece of that kind of back in there, like so. Okay, so I just used that other part. I just wanted a little bit of continuation for that island. And of course, these islands make it so easy to, be able to add in other little bits. Okay, so that being said, let's see now. It's kind of weird because I want to build up some white tones back in there too. So I'm kind of having to think in multiple layers. Normally I work from kind of light in the distance and darker in the foreground. But this is actually using a dark piece of paper, so I'm stamping some things in lighter values. If I do it. We'll see how this goes. Okay, this is a little deer silhouette. Okay. And let's see, do I want to do this really dark or do I do this? I'll do it in front of that other little mound, I think. Or do I put him? I'll put him on that mound, like he's standing on top of it. I think that'll look okay. So let me try to get a similar value of it. So I'll stamp it off once, and I'll stamp it out here again. Alright, so hopefully like so. It's already kind of taken on a little bit more of a, I don't know, an atmospheric look. I hope I don't ruin it. I say that I'm joking, kind of. I mean, I hope it continues on and, for a good result, but I always say, when you're working on things like this, I don't know, I think it's a good approach to approach things as an experiment. It just kind of puts you in the frame of mind that you're willing to take chances on a given piece more than kind of expectations of a flawless, process resulting in, a masterpiece of an end result. And some of the best techniques, of course, are as a result of, just kind of venturing into new things. Okay, so this is Winter Brush. And I'll stamp this somewhere in the foreground, or a couple places in the foreground, maybe. I should use this stamp more often. I really like the silhouette of this. I think it looks really good in, I don't know, just about every time I've used it. I should come up with a smaller size of it, although there is one that's similar. But see that right there? It gives a really nice, I don't know, kind of foreground shape, foreground element for, distance and for texture and value, etc. Okay, so foreground elements like that. All right. I won't put any in the distance there because I want this to really kind of move back visually in space. So if I did another version of that, I'd use a smaller version of it in the distance to really push perspective. Okay, now, gosh. I'm going to use a smaller version of these islands, okay? I want something in the distance to build upon. And that's what was in that scene, although I kind of like what's happening right here, and I could take it in a certain direction, but I do want to play around with kind of the concept of what I saw. So, let me get some smaller versions of those islands, and we'll go from there. Okay, I have a kind of a smaller island here. And what I'm going to do, normally I don't even play around with this, but I need to test for opacity. This is a Colorbox Frost White pigment ink, and I don't want a full impression of that, a full wet impression, I should say, to be more specific, okay? I'll blot that off, and when I stamp it, I'm going to test it on this black piece of paper. I don't have a piece of blank, or do I have a piece of blank paper? Okay, I do. Let me use this little scrap piece of paper right here. Stamp this out and see what that's going to give me. Okay, that's a second impression of that one inking. Now that in the distance is, I guess, okay. It's hard to tell because these inks dry darker than what they look like when they're still wet, so I think that'll be okay, but I don't know. Let's test it out. Well, I guess that was the test. Let's just do it. Okay, so I tell you what, though, I'm going to blot it off once just on my piece of paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the bottom portion. Ew, that gave me a long streak. It's such like thick paint. It's so different than dye-based ink. Okay, I'm going to need to re-ink. Re-ink. Stamp. Okay. I won't I won't wipe across, I'll kind of dab. I got a bunch of pigment ink on my block there. Tack and peel, you can just rinse it off in water and it'll come right off. And then you just let your tack and peel air dry and you're good to go. Okay, I'm kind of blotting it off, or I am blotting it off. On the bottom, I'm trying to remove a lot of this ink so that it transitions from a little bit more opaque and white on the top of it, and it transitions down and kind of fades out. That's what I do with dye-based ink, so we'll see how it works here with this pigment ink. Okay, so this is going to be a distant object, like light is kind of backlighting this foreground, this entire foreground area. I don't want that stamped across my tree here, so this is kind of an unusual process for me, having to do careful masking, but that is my careful mask right there. Okay. It should probably be a little bit narrower, though. But I'll just try to get most of the tree. If I don't get all of it, that's fine, I think. We'll see how it goes. Try not to stamp on top of my deer. I think I missed it. I could see it through this block. Okay, something like that. Yeah, I know, it looks weird. Very weird. Okay, that is that. Let's go for another one. I need a smaller block. Let me see if this will fit on this block right here. Yeah, okay, that'll fit on that one. Alright, this one right here I need to wash because I've got that pigment ink on it. I need an intermediate size block. I don't have a block that really fits that one real well. Although I have another one, but I haven't applied the tack and peel to it yet. Okay, here we go. Yeah, way too much ink. All of our pigment inks pads they're so juicy because I don't think we don't use them quite as often as, like, say, a black pad or something, or colors. I don't think, unless you're doing a ton of embossing, with the same pad and color of pad. So they tend to be very, very juicy, and like, you ink up a stamp, it's like thick paint. Big slathering, which of course allows us to use those embossing powders on it. Okay, I did the same thing. I've kind of removed, I don't know, I'd say 1/3 of the ink from down below. I'm guessing I took off 70% of that ink on the bottom portion, and the top portion probably has about 50%, because remember, I've already stamped it out once, so it removed a lot of ink. Okay, let's get this in the background here. Alright, I really don't want it on that head of that deer. I want that deer head to be I want it to be complete, without something in front of it. Maybe I'll just go like that. Or I can stamp it a little bit higher too, so. A little piece keeps moving around on me. Alright, let's see how this goes. Okay. That little area in there I'll fill in. I'll fill in the horns too. It kind of stamped over them. Okay, so that is that. Alright. So we have these background little, I don't know what they are, bluffs or whatever. Not really bluffs, but they're white, and we have these ones in the foreground that are black. And we have trees coming out of the black trees coming out of the foreground ones, and we have nothing coming out of the background ones, so we need to put some trees on these background ones, for continuity. Alright. Now we want some smaller trees, so I'm going to go with the tree duo here. Alright. When inking up kind of small images like that with a really thick pad, I'm putting a little bit more pressure on the bottom portion. So I have this angled a little bit. And it's still a lot of ink there, so let's blot that off. Okay. I'm going to take a lot of ink off the bottom portion of it. So, and then I'll blot, mask off some of that island. Doesn't represent an island, but that's the name of the stamp. Okay, go like that, and let me wipe off this tree right here, so I can just use a single tree. Make sure I'm stamping the correct one. And this is what the third impression, so this will be even lighter, I assume. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Ooh, I'm looking on the video screen. That looks really light. In person? Well, I don't know. I guess that is pretty light. Alright. I have an even smaller one of these ones. Boy, I haven't used that in a while. Let me go look for it. Okay, here's a smaller one. This is a 1.5 inch. This one's a 1 inch right here. So, pretty close to this size. Usually the wood's a little bit larger than the stamp, but just to give you an idea of the scale that I'm working in. Okay, I'm taking off quite a bit of ink, so I went for a pretty good impression of it right there. And let's wipe off the bottom portion of this too, so it just kind of, or so it hopefully kind of blends in with that kind of distant little mound right there. Okay, and how about another impression of it? Maybe I'll stamp it a little bit lower. Just for some variation. Kind of like that. I lost my kind of deer antlers, but I'll just draw that back in. Okay, I like that, what's going on, but let's go for yet another impression of this. And let's put it over here. It'll be a very light impression, hopefully. Just like that. Alright, let's go for another inking. I want to stamp it out a couple times. Let me take off quite a bit of this ink here, and maybe I'll take off 50% off the bottom of it, or 50% of the design, with maybe 100% removal off the bottom. So I'm just kind of transitioning the top, and I'll see if I can get some additional layers of trees that look like they're a little bit farther back in the distance. Yeah, something like that, I guess. I think that is good right there. I'm thinking it might be good to put a moon or something in there. Kind of a pigment ink moon. Otherwise, in that scene, though, what they did was they kind of sandwiched it where it was kind of, there was this lit area, and then as you moved farther back, it kind of got a little bit darker again. Alright, I'm going to try this. Let's just go all out, since I'm doing this anyways. Okay, we'll come back to this pigment ink here. That's going to be the binder that kind of blends everything together. Okay, I'm cleaning off my stamps here, and let's go for some impressions of this. Let's use the small one right here. I need a really small design. All right, now these impressions up here were with the the Versafine black. Now this one I'm going to do in dye-based black. And I don't know, just the reason is I want to go for a very light in value impression, or impressions of it. So let's do the same thing. I've blotted it off. Now I'm taking this and I'm really taking off a lot of the ink off the bottom portion. And I'm transitioning it from really dry to kind of medium dry up there because I've already done the one impression. And let's go for some background trees in here in this area. Let's see how that looks. It's barely visible. Maybe I took off too much ink. It's kind of the right idea though. Okay, let's be a little bit less careful and stamp out a little bit darker versions. Okay. So they're really pale, like that. I think that looks pretty interesting. I wondered if I should just go for an impression of, okay, let me just go for, or maybe I'll just take off a little bit less ink, okay? I won't stamp it so firmly off. Okay. It's kind of an interesting sandwich. Sandwiching of imagery. Light, dark. Or dark, light, dark. Usually don't do that, but I don't know, I think that makes for kind of an interesting dynamic, doesn't it? I think I like it. Okay, this one right here, I didn't stamp it out. I'm just going to go for a darker impression over here. Okay. I am still wiping it off the bottom. You know, the ink. I'm wiping the ink off the bottom over here. All right. Interesting. I guess so far so good. I'm glad I did that, though. I don't know what it'll look like in the end result, but it's interesting at this point in time. Is it successful? You know, is a kind of a technique or whatever? I don't know. We'll see where it gets to. Okay, now let's start bringing in some atmosphere, and let's try to kind of combine the different impression values. Okay, we have black and white in here, but it's not just a simple black and white. It's kind of darker black and different gradations in here, different values of gray. This on black is probably like this is probably like a 90% or something, 95 to 100%. The deer and these little island impressions in here probably are something like a 70. The white back here, I don't know what it is. It's like a... It's not 0 because it's not white, but 15, and then, I don't know, the Amy's have various gradations of gray back there. Alright, so that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take all of those different values now and somehow merge them together a little bit more harmoniously with the use of additional value. Okay, so I'm just going with the that same pigment ink, the Frost White Colorbox, and this is what someone was asking me about today. They're getting big balls, and you never want to use too much ink. If you use too much ink, remember what I was saying, everyone's pigment ink pads, not everyone's, but most of our ink pads are really super juicy pigment ink. Even if you have it kind of sitting around forever, it's just so thick. I don't know, I guess it's different with different brands too, but for the most part, Like I found a bunch of my pads that were used for workshops in a box, and I don't think I've gone into that box in maybe 10 years or something like that. And that's that pad right there. It's still completely juicy. I didn't have it sealed up or anything like that, like in a Ziploc or anything. It's just super juicy. So anyways, be careful about the amount that you use, because if you don't, you'll just get a bunch of big blobs, everywhere. And what you're going for is you're going for more of a dry brush, delicate application of this medium, okay? So if you want it to look like fog, then you have to apply it as though it is kind of a delicate entity, okay? So you want it to where, when you start tapping this down, you can barely see anything. Now, on this paper, it's a little bit tricky because I'm working on such a dark piece of paper, so everything is so dark, so I'm going to be a little bit kind of careful about this. And it is matte paper, so I can't just wipe it off as easily as glossy cardstock. Glossy cardstock, you can wipe it off even after it dries very easily. Okay, so I'm kind of blending out some of those background areas. Okay, I'll fill in some of the area that I missed, with the masking. I still don't have this down. I want it to be kind of a softer applicator, so it's a little bit tight in the tip of this Q-tip right here. So I'm going to fray it a little bit. Kind of loosen up those fibers a touch. I don't want to loosen it up so much that it's just, I have this kind of awkward shaped tip here. I still want it to kind of apply in a somewhat of a dedicated shape. Okay, so kind of adding some mist down there. And I can add it around in this area, because if the area back there is light, okay, stamped out in light, in a sense what you're saying is that that area is being kind of lit. Maybe the moon is, kind of coming out from behind some clouds or something. Something like that. So you can kind of light that whole area with a little bit of this, a very thin layer of this pigment ink. See that what's kind of happening back in there? Everything's becoming a little bit more diffused. Alright, now let's see. Let's play around with these little mounds in here. Need a little bit more ink. I'm going to mask off and make it look like there's some kind of backlit, or these mounds are backlit with a little bit of fog behind it. There's too much ink on there. Okay, I want, a very gradual application here. And what I do is I kind of taper my use of this, okay? So, what I mean by that is I'll add some of it in a certain area, and then as I move away from that area, I use less and less, so it kind of tapers off from a little bit of a stronger application, thicker application, to thinner, so it kind of just disappears at the edge, okay? So a little bit more down here, I kind of build it up a little bit, and then as I move away from it, I'm kind of using a little bit less pressure and tapping pressure, and I'll just do less and less taps of it, okay? See that? Isn't that tapered? Let me see, let me try to taper it a little bit more. That. Okay, something like that. But it's a little bit stronger as it moves away. It's a little bit heavier. Okay, let's bring it into this kind of more, I was going to say foreground, maybe it's the midground where that deer is standing. I can put it actually in front of the deer, where it's actually kind of standing in the mist. All right, now keep in mind that wherever you use this pigment ink, from my experience, it usually dries darker. Okay, so I'll let it kind of set up a little bit before I kind of adjust it. I don't want to have it so saturated, though. I want it, fairly lightly applied, okay? But like that area looks a little bit too light, but I think it's going to mellow out a little bit when it dries. Okay. Kind of putting it around these trees like it's off in the distance. Okay. Let's put a little bit down here. Let's mask off these little mounds here. And I'll put a little bit behind it, like it's kind of subtly, very subtle backlighting. Something like that. Let me try to blend this out a little bit more. All right. I don't know if I'm done with that. I'll try to determine later. All right. Let me draw those horns back in. Those horns are really kind of obscured by the pigment ink over the top of it. Can't even see it. Let me see. Let me do a quick impression of it. So you can see what I'm doing here. Alright, we want strong silhouettes for our subject matter, so I need to draw it around like that. This is just a Sharpie. You can use any type of pen, gel pen, anything. Alright, there's my horns. And where I went with some pigment ink over the tops of part of this deer, I don't want that, so I'm just redefining it. Okay, so there we go. Alright, I'm still kind of debating on whether or not I want like a little tiny moon up there. I think it might be kind of interesting. But let's play around with a little bit of gel pen accents, okay? Alright, now I think I can use, let's just go with white right now, but I think what might be interesting is the use of some blue or some other types of tones that will kind of harmonize with the blue texture, or the blue surface of this paper. Well, we'll see. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do here. Let's define some of these little mounds here, like the silhouette of these little islands that don't represent islands in this case. Okay, see that right there? It's kind of illuminated a little bit more. Okay. I can kind of continue on the idea of these little highlights or kind of directional lighting on some of these other objects. Kind of as it moves away from the light, what I'll do is use less dots. Okay, so it's saying that, you know, there's kind of stronger lighting in the distance, but by the time it kind of gets up here, we're talking about very little light kind of reaching this area, so I'll just spread the dots out a little bit farther and make those dot applications a little bit more sparse, okay? You put some on the trees. The trees are white, but the gel pen dot is going to be whiter, so kind of makes the trees a little bit more three-dimensional by having multiple values on it. In this case, just in little details. And I'm kind of putting them on some of these branches. Not outlining the branches, but just a few little dots on them. It might be one dot on some of the branches and 2 or 3 on others, depending on the location of it. But it's definitely not a formula. You just have to kind of eyeball it and see how it's going. Sometimes I put too much, because it is really a fun process, and it's easy to get carried away. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think carried away in, you know, the process of working on a piece of art is generally, I think, good. Because that means we're having fun, right? It might not end up being kind of, you know, the best look for the end result, but who cares, you know? Alright, so there's some little dots in there using white. All right, let me try to find a blue pen that will complement. I'm looking at some gel pens. I have it. If you watch this video channel a lot, I know I say the same things over and over and over, but some people might be tuning in for the first time. But this is a set of, I have a set of 180 Shuttle Art gel pens. Okay, it's just a real cheap set. It was $25 or something, $25 to $30 on Amazon. And you know, when you're talking about a set that large, you're talking about, you know, a pretty full range of values of every hue. So there's, you know, big range of blues. There's all kinds of blue tones in this case. There's metallic blue, glitter blue, pastel blue. Sound like that episode of Forrest Gump or something, you know, shrimp. But there's all kinds of different types. So it's fun to utilize kind of a full range of values and types of pens depending on the color scheme that you're working with. So, like in a sunset scene, it's really fun to use different reds and oranges, as well as maybe some glitter, red and orange and metallic, you know, all those types of things. Look at a scene like this. It might be interesting to use some, I don't know, metallic blue. I don't know, just different things like that. Okay, so I'm kind of adding this in. These pens are really, they are thin in terms of their pigment to binder ratio. Okay, so, but in this case it's kind of good because I could add this down, and it's a light blue, but it's a very translucent light blue, so things underneath show through. In this case, black impressions where I'm adding it right here. But I might want that because I might not want a stark white dot, okay? I might want kind of something a little bit more subtle that's going to give me a little bit of detailing and texture and lighting without being overly apparent, okay? Oops. Now that's going to dry darker, so I don't even care about that. But see, I'm putting this on the sides of some of these trees, facing the light. The light is kind of more interior lit in this scene. See the tree over here on the left side of the tree. On a few of the branches I have the highlights. I mean, you don't have to be so strict. I mean, you can put a dot on the, you know, the right side, but it's kind of predominantly left side lit for the right side trees, okay? And now when I turn this around and I go to this side will be lit. Alright, let me change the exposure. My exposure is too light for the this scene right now. Okay, that's all more like it. Scene looks darker, huh? But I think that's about kind of more true to the current value of this scene. I have to overexpose because of this white paper that I'm using when I start these scenes, but once the scene starts getting darker and darker, I'm not working on a white piece of paper anymore. That's when I'm working on white. But even with this one. Okay, so now remember I'm on the left side trees, so the trees on the left side of the scene are becoming more left side of the scene becoming right side lit. little I don't know how to describe it. The textures, I guess, on the ground here, kind of in a little horizontal motion. Just for a little bit more texture, I think. It's not a real clean line, but that's actually what I'm going after. I want it kind of scratchy. I don't want a real definitive line down there, I don't think. Because I don't know what I'm doing, so I wanted rather kind of be a kind of a conservative mark here. Okay. I'm assessing that area. I think that area looks okay as is. Oh, here. See these trees, or bush right here. Let's go back to white. Wait a minute. That, where's my Shuttle Art? Oh, okay, my Shuttle Art white. Like, this is the Uniball Signo. That's the one I was using in here. That one's very opaque, and the Shuttle Art one is, it's a cheaper pen, so the ink is thinner. But maybe that will be good here. I want kind of a thin ink on here for some of these highlights, just so that they're not so stark white. So you can play around with varying opacities, okay, for different effects. Well, it's the same effect, but it's just varying degrees of that effect, I should say. So kind of pulling this one out, it kind of pulls it out from the background and kind of puts it in the foreground right here a little bit. I can't see, I'm just kind of faking it. I don't know where these branches are going, so where it kind of disappears into that island. All right, let's do this. This pen is kind of nice because it looks gray, if anything. Okay, that's the white of the Signo pen. Okay, it's like quite stark. And let's compare and contrast that to, see those white dots, but look at this. This is really quite gray, okay? Which is kind of nice, okay? It's nice having the variation in there too, and being able to use a different pen for the type of mark you want it to make. So I don't have gray. Well, I do have gray, I think, but this is kind of even better because it's just, instead of variations of gray, it's just different translucencies. Okay, let's do this deer here. Okay. Why not? If trees are being lit a certain way, why not have our subject matter similarly lit? Okay. So like that. I think I need to adjust the exposure of this again. That looks really dark. Yeah, I mean that's what it looks like right there. Right here, it's kind of capturing the glare of the paper, but okay, I think I could use a little bit more of a bolder highlighting in the foreground. It's starting to look kind of textural. Okay, now I did those little squiggles down there with that gel pen, the blue one. Now let me put a few little highlights on some of those. And just to kind of animate those a little bit, since they are now kind of features in here. And let's put a stronger illuminated mark. You can see how much that white really stands out from the Uniball Signo pen, gel pen. The more of these types of things that you put, kind of introduce onto your objects, the stronger the lighting seems to be scene-wise. Alright, here we were getting out of winter with the latest kind of spring scenes that I was doing, but kind of taking a pause and going back to a little bit of a wintry looking scene right here. But I wanted to try out that technique. It would have been interesting on kind of on a gray piece of paper. I don't know if it would have looked so wintry, than to do it in blue like this, but I wanted this sandwiching idea of oftentimes I do oscillate things. I go dark, light, dark, light. But this one, working on a dark piece of paper and kind of sandwiching that lighting in the middle distance is a different kind of look or approach for me. And I liked that when I saw that in that video. And like I said, I'll try to link to it. Oops. I am kind of wondering if I do a moon up here or something like that. I don't know if I'd like that, a moon up there, because then I'm saying, in here, it might be in a different area of the scene, just out of the scene, and kind of, the clouds have opened up and it's kind of shining down here. I guess I could. I can say the moonlight is hitting this way, or we put a moon over here. I think that would be kind of interesting, but then there would be a tendency of me to backlight some of those distant trees, and I don't know if I want to do that. I might want to just keep things nice and simple here and just go for some different stars up here or something of that sort. Okay, so with that being said, let's stick to the color scheme. Let me go for some... Okay, this gel pen is dark blue. It looks like it's even darker than this piece of paper. It's giving me a dark mark. I didn't know it was darker than the paper it is, I guess. Okay. Kind of adds a different layer of depth into the scene. Now, those are very subtle, aren't they? Right? So subtle they're practically invisible, if not invisible. But we're not done yet. Okay, that was the Shuttle Art light blue. Here's a Uniball Signo pastel blue. I think it's a darker blue than the Shuttle Art one, but it's more opaque, so it stands out slightly more. They're pretty close. Kind of cluster your stars once in a while, you know, so that it's not so completely uniform. You don't have to do this all in blue. You can, you can do other colors. That might be kind of interesting as a contrasting color. And can you see those? They look like just tiny little specks, don't they? But what I'm doing is I'm trying to build up some depth in that space as well. Okay? Using multiple values of things. So we're kind of following suit with what's going on down here. Kind of in a different way, but same concept of different values on things. Different values of highlights. This is the white Shuttle Art one, so it's, see, as I draw it on there, it kind of stands out, but then as it sets up a little bit, it dries much duller. So it's kind of fading out as it dries. But see, we're kind of getting this little variation. See that? What's happening in the sky? It looks varied, so to me it looks like stars at different distances. Let me see. Get that glare out of there. Okay. Okay. Now, for the brightest of stars, or maybe we can just keep it. That's where I put that Shuttle Art one. Let me put a little bright little dot in the middle of that one. Okay. What you should do for little areas like that, look up your sign and your constellation, and then draw your constellation in star form up in your sky. You'd be like your little kind of artistic kind of nod, to yourself. That's, you made that scene. I don't know what Leo looks like. That's my thing, but I used to do that. I used to do like the Milky, not the Milky Way, but like the Big Dipper. I'd put it up there or something like that, like Ursa Major. If I had a bear in there or something like that. There's no sign for deer. I'm not into the zodiac or anything like that, but I just think those little touches like that are kind of cool. Or if you make kind of a Christmas card or a birthday card for someone, if you kind of do a little thing up in the sky, kind of, it's very, very subtle. Like, they would never know that you did that, but I don't know. It's those like those little fun things that you can kind of add into a piece, that maybe only you know or will ever recognize again, I think in movies they call it subtext or something like that. All right. Let me see. Silver. This pen working? I went through my stack of gel pens and I tossed out some that weren't working. I think all these ones are working now. This one's a silver one. I don't think you'll be able to capture this, but let me see. If I add a ton of it, you could probably tell the one, the stars that are metallic silver, because they kind of stand out a little bit more. Maybe you can see like that, as they capture the light. And, I mean, those types of little things like that are kind of fun to add down, in your scene somewhere. Again, it's very subtle, because you can only kind of see it if it's reflecting light, so kind of adds a nice shimmery texture. This scene looks very much, I don't know, it's very reminiscent of that other kind of shadowy scene that I did with, some stronger tree trunks. But this one has that center lighting, so it does take on a little bit of a different spirit than that one. Okay, now, speaking of that other scene that I did before, using a dark blue, or did I do that one purple? I can't remember. But let's add some shadows into this scene now, okay? Alright, this is a cosmetic. As I've seen it described, it says foundation brush. I don't know these things. But I want just a nice light coating of ink down here for my shadow areas, okay? So I'm just inking up using, this is just a dye-based ink. I'm not going into the Versafine. I don't think I need to, because I don't need such a stark, dark black. But let's add a little bit of shadow shading to this. I think it'll potentially kind of add a nice touch in terms of extending the value range. So instead of a dark blue paper, it'll be even in darker blue, because I'm putting some black over some of it, okay? I'll show you what it looks like on this side, okay? So there's a little bit of a shadow down there, and you can see this one right here, there's no shadow. Okay, so this goes from dark to well, dark blue over here, but it's going from black to, a darker blue and into the surface blue, okay? Now let's do the same thing over here. You can see this one right here. Right now this object is kind of floating, so if I kind of anchor it with the use of some shadows or shade, I think that can improve the look of that, and it will also kind of help to kind of define our lighting that's happening within the scene. By providing a cast shadow, okay? Okay, so see, now we have this kind of range going from darker to lighter right here. Plus this little island is now casting a shadow. Okay, it's not just a floating object with no opacity to it. And we can do the same thing in here a little bit. Okay, maybe it won't go as dark because that island back there isn't as dark. Same thing with this one back here. And let's go in the upper right and left corner, okay? Just kind of adding a little bit of a vignette. This brush was given to me by someone at the Carson show, the last show. Thank you again. I don't think they watch this channel, but... But they said, I don't know, like a set of, I don't know, I keep changing it every time I do these videos, but I thought it was like a set of 8 of these or something. Quite a lot, and it was like, I'm pretty sure it was less than $20. I thought they said like $15 or something like that. But I like it for the perimeter applications of ink like this, because it adds it in a very light tone. Even, see, that's like freshly inked up. It gives you a really light application of ink. And this is a brush here, so it's not foam or something like that. They're little synthetic fibers. Alright, so I think that's it there. You see that nice little shadow area down here and whatnot. So kind of a backlit, center lit area. I don't know if that's my first time. It's the first time in this type of look, at least. And that's really fun. So let me get the glare out of this thing. But I don't know, it looks fairly dimensional to me. And boy, talk about... It's a minimal use of tone. I'm using white and black, basically. But I'm using various degrees of it and various amounts. And that's the same thing for the gel pens, too. So, I don't know, you can really get a nice, rich surface from kind of minimal, a minimal color range as far as the media that you're using. It's just the amount of it that you use will determine kind of what it's looking like, especially when you're working on a dark piece of paper like this. So, fun stuff. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel.